Good afternoon and a very warm welcome indeed to today's iOB business webinar. It's an absolute pleasure to be on this session with you. My name is Ben and I'm the resident business coach here at iOB Business, and I'll be the one talking you through today's iOB business webinar. Now, just before we get kicked off, if you do have any questions for today's session, you're more than welcome to ask them as we go throughout today's webinar. In between each of the three core topics, I am going to take a brief pause, which will allow you the chance to jot down any notes, ask any questions, anything like that. So please don't feel like you're going to get left behind. We'll make sure that everybody has plenty of time for asking questions and jotting down notes. So if this is your first time joining us on one of these webinars, a big warm welcome to you. Thank you for taking the time to join us. And to those of you joining us for the second, third, fourth, fifth time, it's a pleasure to see you again. Thank you for coming back. It's always great to go through these sessions with you. So whilst we're getting ready for 2 o'clock, we're waiting for the mark to start the webinar, and then we will get rocking. So today we're talking about how to cultivate a healthy work environment, which is a really, really good thing to talk about in business management and generally understanding how we can keep everything running smoothly with our business once we have it. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is switch off the video camera. So you won't be able to see my face anymore, but you should, in just a moment's time, be able to see the presentation that we have up on screen for you in just a second. Okay, there we go. Perfect. So you should now be able to see the presentation up on screen. You should no longer be able to see my face, but you should be able to hear my voice. So if you could just do me a big favor and let me know that you can hear my voice and that you can see the presentation up on screen that says how to cultivate a healthy work environment. And I'll then know that we are ready to get kicked off with today's session. Just a couple of little preliminary checks that we like to do to make sure that everybody can hear us loud and clear, and we don't have anybody missing any content or anything like that. Okay. Perfect. Looks good to me. Can hear you fine. Grand. Okay, well, thank you ever so much. Thank you for that in the chat box. So we will get cracking then with today's webinar. Final reminder, if you do have any questions, please feel free to ask them. Always happy to answer them. And sorry, I should have said, I'll be getting to them at the end of today's webinar during the Q&A session, which usually runs for a few minutes at the end. We always have a couple of questions to answer, and it's always a genuine pleasure. So please don't be shy. Feel free to ask away with anything that you might wish to ask. So today's topic, how to cultivate a healthy work environment. Your presenter today is myself. My name is Ben and I'm a business coach. I love doing this. It's my absolute passion. It's a genuine pleasure to be on here speaking through this webinar with you today. I specialize in helping small businesses grow. It's what I do. It's what I love. It's an absolute pleasure to get to do it, especially on webinars like this and giving educational content. Okay, so discussion points that we have. Number one, setting clear boundaries. Okay, this is about cultivating a healthy work environment for everybody involved. Okay. Number two, be realistic with scheduling and deadlines. Very, very important. There's some wonderful content in this webinar that we've worked hard to put together for you to provide as much possible value. So it's going to be a really, really good one that we have coming up today. And finally, championing a supportive culture within your business. Okay, so let's get started with topic number one. Set clear boundaries. Okay, now what do we mean by this? Well, number one, ensure that your working hours are clearly defined. Okay, now why would you do this? It's so that your team and clients of the business are fully aware when you're contactable. Okay, now it's very, very common in the early days of a business that the business owner would be on the phone at 10 o'clock at night because a client has texted them and said, I need help with X, Y, Z, this, that, the other thing. Office hours aren't clearly defined. They've never been discussed. So therefore, the client thinks it's fair and reasonable to contact you at this time. Now, whilst many of us would think, well, this is general instinct, I probably shouldn't call somebody at 10 o'clock at night. Some people don't have that knowledge. Some people don't feel that way. So, okay, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that some people are used to different things. Some people deal with things in different ways. So what we have to make sure that we're doing is making sure that actually 10 p.m. is an inappropriate time to call me because I'm sticking within my working hours, okay? The other thing that we can look at doing is clarifying this with our team as well, all right? So you may not have a team yet. You may be a very early business owner. Maybe a team is something that you're looking to have in the future, or, whatever way this sets up for you, okay? But typically with team members, we have to be making sure that, again, working hours are clearly defined so that people know when we're contactable. Now, with team members, there's maybe an additional layer of support if something's extremely important to them and the day stops at 5 p.m. We could maybe, discuss if there's something you need, you could talk to me 6, 7 o'clock at night, but please no 10, 11, 12 o'clock phone calls, okay? Now, emails, messages, etc. are fine. They're different. And there's absolutely nothing that says that you have to respond to a message, text message, WhatsApp, email, Facebook message, LinkedIn message, whatever it is that you're getting at any given time. You respond to it back when you are within your working hours. Okay. So ensuring that your working hours are clearly defined, what that means in a very, very brief nutshell is 9 a.m. till 5 p.m. if those are your working hours. Okay. Now, that's pretty standard in the UK where I am. So I'll just use that as an example. It's 8 hours a day for anybody to get in touch if they need something. Now, there are different processes that you can put in place, and we'll discuss this. But generally speaking, please no phone calls after 5 p.m. Please no meeting requests after 5 p.m. I respect my own time. Now, what will begin to happen when you start behaving like this is your business will be respected as its own entity. Okay. Now, there becomes a barrier of definition that's hard for some people to occasionally understand. Okay. Now, understandably, if a new client comes into a brand new business, the business owner isn't yet defining boundaries and the new client doesn't yet know where they stand in terms of what's expected of them and what's not expected of them. Therefore, we find ourselves in a position of having to clarify with our clients, when it is acceptable and when it's not acceptable. And the final piece of the cake here, if you like, when we're looking at defining these boundaries clearly and our business acting as its own entity, is if you think, well, any office on the high street or any kind of establishment, say it was a cafe, for example, would you phone them at 5:30 when you know they close at 5 to put through an order? You could try, but it would just go to voicemail and you wouldn't blame them for not picking up the phone at 5:30. Well, hopefully you wouldn't. So that's where we find ourselves with setting boundaries. We have to have respect for our business and respect for ourselves. Otherwise, nobody else is going to respect it. So the next thing, define channels of communication that are appropriate and acceptable for use within the business. Okay. Now, this is extremely important. Okay. If you are only to be contacted by email, please let your clients and your team members know that you are only to be contacted by email. Now, often for team members, especially if they have your personal phone number, it should be considered a privilege and not something that can just be used to text for a problem or a quick issue or something they want to talk about or deal with. Email, for me personally, I define that as the official channel. So please make sure that if this is something that you're doing, you are encouraging contact via the way that you want to be contacted. Now, it's not to say that email is the only way. If you're somebody that likes to chat over WhatsApp and email and, and any other kind of messaging software that businesses use, absolutely fine. It's up to you. But whatever those are, make them clear so that the team knows where they stand and clients know where they stand. Okay. Now, we should be able to give out our personal phone number for, emergencies for team members or, potentially some clients or whatever, without it being abused in the sense of, you're going to try and call me at 11 o'clock at night, or you're going to send me several text messages when I haven't asked you to do that. Okay. So define the channels of communication that are appropriate and acceptable to use within the business. Now, the reason we say this is it may seem firm, but these things have to be established from the offset. In order to cultivate a healthy work environment, everybody must be clear on what the boundaries are. You as a person will have your own boundaries, and everybody within your team and each of your clients will also have their own boundaries. So as we said earlier, some people may not mind. They might not have that sort of knowledge of the fact that you don't want a phone call at 9 p.m., but they themselves might be okay with a phone call at 9 p.m. And this is really the difference between, understanding each other and ensuring that we are working well within each other's boundaries, and what's acceptable to some is not acceptable to others. Okay. Now, next thing that you can do is be clear on the processes for inquiring about business-related queries or workplace concerns. So I'll begin with workplace concerns. Okay. We're looking at this dealing with our team. Okay. If there's a concern within the workplace, it needs to be known that, we don't just sort of, if I'm walking through the office, you don't just sort of pull me aside and say, hey, can I talk to you about something completely off guard? Instead, I'd much rather you sent me an email. I'll pick it up as urgent if you flag it or mark it as urgent, and then we can book in a proper meeting to go through and speak about what your concerns are thoroughly. Okay, I don't want to be making a cup of tea and you come up to me and say, Ben, here are my concerns. Okay, because at that point, it's not been put through any kind of official channel. It can't be dealt with effectively. We're not going through the agenda or anything that needs to be worked through. Okay, it's too casual, too informal. So if there's something proper that needs to be done, it should go through a formal process. Now, the same works here for inquiring about business-related queries. Okay, if there's a potential client, if you need to book a meeting with me, please do so on my Calendly link or whatever it is that you're using, or my appointment booking software. Okay, make it known that there is a specific protocol for booking time with you. Okay, now they can do with this information as they will, and it's our responsibility and our duty to give them the information that they might need. Okay, as long as we have a fair and reasonable process for booking time with us or getting in touch with us, it's perfectly reasonable for us to ask that we don't just get text after text or, you know, a random phone call to say, hey, I want to speak to you now. Okay. We as professionals would thrive more in the environment where our boundaries are being respected and processes are being followed. Okay. We respect our own time. It allows us to focus and get done what we need to get done today. Because one of the biggest mistakes that I see small business owners make or new business owners make is everybody's phoning them all the time, everybody's emailing them all the time, and everybody's texting them all the time. And they believe that they have to respond to that text message or that they have to pick up that phone, otherwise they're going to lose the client. Now, often this belief comes from the fact that no boundaries were established at the beginning of the client working relationship. Okay, so now maybe your client does have an expectation that you're going to pick up the phone when they want you to. Okay, and if they're going to leave because of that, it could be because there's been a sort of, you know, an agreement, an informal agreement sort of set up, unspoken, that you do pick up the phone at 10 o'clock at night. Okay. Now, had this been clarified before, it's not to say that the client wouldn't leave if you stopped doing that or didn't do it, period. But it's essentially a lot easier if boundaries are clarified right from the offset. Okay. Now, final, make it clear what is appropriate for discussion in and around the workplace with both your team and clients of the business. Okay. So I'll begin with your team. What's appropriate and what's not appropriate for discussion. Okay. These are generally pretty clear and generally pretty common knowledge, but there are some things that are completely inappropriate to discuss in the workplace. And, you know, I can give you an example of, say, you know, maybe somebody trying to discuss the financials of the business whilst the client is present. Okay. Something like this. So it doesn't hurt at all to just have a document of something that should be jotted down and clearly outlined by the business. And this is given to every new team member that comes on board, and it just says, look, here's a little list of things that we just generally don't do. So if you could avoid doing these things, that would be fantastic. Okay. Just on the off chance that it isn't already clear. Okay. Now, with clients of the business, again, it's the same thing. We make it appropriate for discussion in the sense of, you know, we won't take any kind of verbal abuse. We won't take any kind of, you know, over the top negativity. You're more than entitled to vent your frustration about things, but we won't deal with anything specifically aggressive. Okay, just little things like this. So we don't sort of sit with a list of rules and say, do this and don't do this and don't do that. We say it very gently, very politely, but when we start a new working relationship with a client, we say, look, here's the way that we work. We respect our team, we respect ourselves. We'll always try and help you, but please don't ever be aggressive with us or anything like that in any capacity. Okay, it's more than reasonable and it's more than fair. So setting your boundaries. That is the end of topic number one. I'm going to take a brief pause as promised, and I'll let you jot down any notes that you wish to take. And indeed, do ask any questions you may wish to ask as well. And I'll see you again in just a moment for topic number two. Wonderful. Let's move ourselves on to topic number two then. Okay, be realistic with scheduling and deadlines. So cultivating a healthy work environment, how does this affect that? Well, a great way of engineering a low-stress work environment is not setting unrealistic expectations of yourself or your team. Okay. Now, what do I mean by this? I mean, let's not say that we can get a full website built within 3 days. Okay. Let's not make unrealistic promises, ones that will be extremely difficult to keep. Even if we can, in all theory, technically do it, we've got to try and make sure that we're being reasonable and realistic. We should always be thinking, is that going to stress me out on a particular level? Is that going to create an environment where I have to work 15, 16 hours a day to get something done? Is it going to create further issue with any clients or team members if, you know, our team members are working significantly overtime? Is the client not going to get something on time? Whatever could cause this issue or cause this problem, we have to be careful not to overpromise and underdeliver. Okay, so a great way of engineering a low stress work environment is not setting unrealistic expectations on yourself or your team. All right, so clients will typically be happier if they're informed the project will be completed to a high caliber, okay, but will take slightly longer as opposed to being promised an unrealistically fast turnaround. All right, so if you have sort of inadvertently found yourself in an environment where, okay, we made a promise, it's going to be very, very difficult to keep that promise. So what we're going to have to do instead is really try and make sure that we are going to our client and saying, look, we're terribly sorry. Some things that we didn't have control over have now taken effect, and we aren't going to be able to deliver the project on time. It's going to take very, very, very slightly longer. Okay. Now, if you find yourself in that situation, that's the best way to deal with it. Don't just deliver the project late, not say anything, and hope that nobody says anything. Okay. If you're going to arrive into a situation like that, try and be dealing with it proactively first. Okay. Now, second thing, clients will typically be happier if they're informed at the start, okay? If you can, try and get ahead of whatever your project is and let your clients know that you're going to maybe take a little bit longer than what's perhaps ideal for them, okay? Now, they'd rather be informed about this ahead of time so that no unrealistic expectations are met, okay? Now, when you are looking at doing this kind of thing, it is difficult not to try and be overly, you know, pleasing for a client or tell them everything that they might specifically want to hear and saying, yeah, no, we can absolutely do this, or no, that's not going to be an issue for us. Okay, try and refrain from over-promising to try and please the client. Okay, generally they'll be more happy if you're just honest and straightforward and say, look, okay, you know, it's going to take a little bit longer, but it will be to a high quality and we're going to do it as fast as we can, but I'm not going to promise you a crazy, unrealistic turnaround. Okay. So next, being realistic with deadlines ensures that each person responsible for a project has sufficient time to plan and execute the task. Okay. So when you're realistic, you make sure that there's a deadline and time for everyone to do whatever it is that needs to be done. Nobody's stressed, nobody feels under the gun, nobody feels any kind of pressure, so they can work to their most efficient, most optimal selves. Okay, that is the environment that we want. That is a healthy work environment. Somebody will do their best work, not when they are stressed, but when they are feeling peaceful and relaxed and working consistently, smoothly, and productively. Okay, now, we often move faster when we're moving at a steady pace. It's a little bit more slowly, as if we try and run as fast as we can and then grind to a halt, and then run as fast as we can and then grind to a halt. Better to just keep a steady, consistent pace of being productive, okay? Now, finally, less time conflicts means less stress and encourages more collaboration, okay? It's discussion, general productivity across the business. If we're less stressed out, we're going to work with each other better. We're going to have more collaborative ideas, more creativity, more enjoyment, more fulfillment, all of these wonderful things that happen when we're at peace. If we're constantly stressed out, we're going to find ourselves in an environment where we don't want to share anything with teammates. We don't want to talk to each other because we're too busy trying to get this done. We're stressed for meeting that deadline. We're stressed for meeting this deadline. It's not a healthy or productive environment. Okay, so that brings us to the end of topic number 2. I once again will do a brief pause to give you a chance to jot down any notes and ask away with any questions that you might need to ask. And I'll see you again in just a moment for topic number 3. All right, fantastic. So let's move ourselves on to topic number 3, champion a supportive culture. Okay, now this is the third and final component. An enormous part of cultivating, well, it's a very big topic, of course, but the third and final component of this specific webinar today. So an enormous part of cultivating a healthy work environment is ensuring that anybody involved within the business is confident they will be supported. Okay. So you don't necessarily have to have an open door policy in the sense of, anybody can come in at any time. But what we do want to make sure is that everybody that's a part of the business in any way knows that they have support. Their ideas will be listened to. They'll be encouraged to do great work and all the other positive things that can come around it. Okay. It's very, very important that we are supportive. Okay. Especially if we are hiring team members, they need to know that they can rely on you to support them and help them as opposed to, doing the opposite. Okay. So any concerns, queries, or worries are dealt with promptly, professionally, and confidentially. Okay. Any concerns, if it's from a client, it needs to be dealt with only by you or whoever is given permission to work on whatever the issue is by yourself with the permission of the client or directly from the client themselves. Okay. Now, queries and worries, they need to be dealt with promptly. Okay. If somebody has a problem, we don't want to be waiting a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks to deal with it. We need to make sure that whatever it is that is being, coming forward as an issue is being dealt with very, very promptly and very indeed professionally as well. There should be a process in place for, say, a customer complaint. If they need to talk about something, they need to be aware that it's a safe environment for them to do so without any negative backlash on themselves, the campaign, or anything that's going on. Same with team members. Okay. Now, if there's a problem between a team member and a client, we never directly go to anyone and point the finger and say it's your fault. We just try and establish what the issue is and how we can repair it. Okay. Now, your business should always aim to be supportive of the ideas and concepts your team or clients may present you with. So we don't laugh in anyone's face. We don't reject any ideas straight off the bat. If somebody's come to you with an idea, there's a very high chance that they've given it a lot of thought. They're very proud of it. And it's something that they at least want to be up for discussion. And now, if you have a reasonable, claim to sort of not necessarily dismiss, but potentially reject the idea politely, then that's fair. Okay. It doesn't mean to say that you have to take on every single idea from every client and every team member all of the time. If you have fair and reasonable belief that, that's not going to work or it's not going to be effective, explain why, but take their ideas on board and say, look, it's not something that we're going to do now, but potentially something we could look at in the future if this, and this would be changed, or however you want to deal with it. But make sure that you're doing it in a supportive and happy environment and manner. So finally, a supportive culture is focused on daily, okay? It carries into how people involved within your business speak to one another, speak with clients, and how they generally handle themselves in and around the office, okay? This supportive network removes any toxicity from the office. It removes any negative actions from the office. If there's sort of interpersonal troubles with team members or team members and clients, it's something that should be resolved promptly, quickly, professionally, and we can move on in a supportive and healthy work environment. Okay, so that brings us to the end of topic number 3. What we're going to do in just a moment, after one more final pause, is get to the recap, and then we'll do the Q&A session right at the end there for you. Thank you for the questions that I have so far. You're still more than welcome to ask away with any more, and I'll see you again in just a moment. Fantastic. So let's put ourselves onto the recap for today's session then. So number 1, define appropriate timings and communication protocol for your team members and your clients within the business. Number 2, always allow sufficient time for project completion. Don't let anybody have an undue amount of stress over something that doesn't need to be stressed about. And finally, a supportive culture at the core of the organization, and make sure you champion this so that it's in your day-to-day actions and the day-to-day actions of the business. Okay, so as always, a massive thank you for taking time to attend today's webinar. If you'd like to talk to a member of our team, you're more than welcome to head over to iob-business.com/talk and book a call at a time that suits you. When you follow that link, you'll see a calendar just like this one, and you can pick a date and a time that suits you to have a chat with us. Okay, so whilst I leave this link up on screen, I'll pull up the questions that I have from today's session. First question, I struggle with realistic scheduling. I always overpromise. Yeah, cool. You know what? Honestly, it's an easy mistake to make, okay? Give yourself time to improve the habit. Just try and next time you deal with that scenario, it is difficult sometimes when dealing with a client, as we said in topic number 2, to not overpromise because you always want to impress them, but just be realistic. And honestly, I find a lot of the times personally, the clients will respect me more for being straightforward as opposed to overpromising on something that I clearly can't deliver. Hope that helps. Great question. Next question. How do I make it clear that I do not want to be contacted outside? Sorry, I'll start that again. How do I make it clear that I do not want to be contacted outside work hours politely? Okay, well, Listen, if you can, setting boundaries and expectations from the get-go is always an ideal thing to do, and an essential now going forwards. And the reason for that is if they ever get broken, you can just politely refer back to the initial agreement and just say, look, as per our agreement when we began our working relationship, I don't take calls after 5 o'clock. You yourself have a life to lead, etc. A reasonable person would understand this. Now, slightly more complex if you're now in an environment where that wasn't clarified from the offset and it keeps happening, which I'm guessing is what your question is getting at more. Essentially, Ben, how do I stop this person from calling me at 10 o'clock? Okay, so next time it happens, just, miss the call and send them an email and say, hello, I don't usually work at this time. Is something the matter that I can help with? Often, if you do it this way, you'll probably get a response either that night or in the morning saying, oh, sorry, no, it's actually fine. We can just talk about it tomorrow. Or, if they've responded in the morning, we can talk about it today or this week. Often you find that it isn't an emergency. Okay, they're probably just calling because they think that that's okay. Now, responding to a missed phone call via email, it does two things. Number one, it deals with it in professional manner so that you're not completely missing it if those sort of expectations are there from the client. The second thing that it's doing is letting them know that you're not calling them back and you're not even texting them. You're going back to the channel that you want to be contacted on. And it's a kind of polite, quiet way of saying, please get back to me on email. Okay. Something that I've done before and it's worked quite effectively. All right. So hope that that helps that question as well. So any more questions from today? No. Okay, perfect. Well, as always, have a wonderful week. Thank you ever so much once again for attending, and I very much hope to see you again on the next iOB business webinar. Take care and bye for now.